All right, so we've gone over two specific examples for how to solve for different pieces of our triangle. Now we're going to kind of put all of that together, and we're going to do something called solving right triangles. So the idea for solving a right triangle is we're finding all of the pieces. We're finding all of the angles, all of the side lengths, and that's going to allow us to, again, get all of the pieces here. So we don't actually need all that much information to do this with right triangles. That's why right triangles are so powerful. So again, we know that that angle is 90 degrees. Let's label our sides here. We'll say that they are sides A, B, and C. And for the sake of simplicity, we'll call this angle X and that angle Y. And that's just a little degree sign next to them to remind us that those are, in fact, angles. So let's say you have a question where it's telling you that X equals 51 degrees and C equals 34. And they're asking you, based off of this information, to solve everything in this triangle. Well, some things that we can do right away is we actually can solve for all of our angles because we know that this one is 90 degrees here, and they just told us that this one is 51 degrees. So for the angles, we can use our angle sum theorem, which is 51 plus 90 plus y is going to give us the total of the triangle, which has to be 180. So we'll put these two together. We'll get that answer of 141, and then we can subtract that from 180. So that's our first step. So dealing with angles, as long as we have at least one of them, isn't too terrible. We've done this before. It's just a little bit of review of that skill there. Okay, so we get y equals 39 degrees. Okay, so that step is done. We can say check angles, feeling good about ourselves, give ourselves a pat on the back. But now we're going to have to use some trigonometry, some of those trig functions, sine, cosine, tangent, to solve for A, B, and C. So a second thing that they're giving us here is that C equals 34. Now remember, C is our hypotenuse, or our longest side. So we're going to use this with our trig functions combined with our angle measures, and all of that together is going to allow us to solve for actually A and B here. So let's start off, maybe we can use sine. And we can use the sine of 51, let's say. So sine, if you remember, it's opposite over hypotenuse. So the opposite of 51 is going to be A, and our hypotenuse we know is 34. So sine of 51, I'll punch that into the calculator, gives us 0.777, so we'll call it 0.78, equals A over 34. Again here, let's multiply both sides by 34, and we'll get a final answer of A equals 26.4. And the way that I chose sine was actually a little bit random. I know that I needed something that had hypotenuse so I could choose either sine or cosine, but I like sine. I don't know why. I just always like to use sine, so I chose to use sine. But we can go over another example. Let's use cosine now. So cosine is going to be adjacent over hypotenuse. And in this case, we need to solve for b. So we know for sure that our adjacent does have to be b. We do know that our hypotenuse is 34. So we can go again, punch in our value. So adjacent to angle x is b. So we do have to use angle x, which is 51. So we don't have a choice there. We can't use 39 because adjacent to 39 is 26.4. We just solve for that. So we can't use that. Okay, so plug this in, cosine 51 degrees now is 0.629, so we can round that to 0.63, b over 34, and then now again, multiply both sides by 34. Do that, these b's cancel out, and we're left with 34 times what we just got with our cosine of 51. So we'll get b equals 21.39, or we can just call that 21.4. Okay, so we've successfully solved for all of our side lengths and all of our angle lengths. Other things to note when you're doing these, sometimes you might need to use the Pythagorean Theorem, that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. In fact, if you prefer that over trig functions, we didn't even need to do this for cosine here. We could have done the Pythagorean Theorem instead because we had two of the side lengths. So remember that that is something that you can utilize. with that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So that is another tool that you have at your disposal. But again, putting all of our trig functions and Pythagorean theorem and angle sum theorems together will allow us to solve for all of our pieces. A little bit more in depth, but again, we did it. We have a, we have b, we have the measure of angle y, and I think those were all the things that we needed to solve for. So we did it. All right, team. So again, finishing up for today, you're going to have a few of these questions to practice, again, solving for all of the pieces of your triangles.